Howdy everyone, it's me once again, the one and only Ghidorah. So today I figured I'll just talk about something kaiju related because for one, it's been a good while since I've spoken about any kind of these movies. So yes, to some extent I'm using this as an excuse to talk about giant monsters and whatnot. And first and foremost, I just want to state that these movies were always political from the start. I don't understand how a lot of people have that misconception that these movies were never political, even though technically were from the get go. I mean, yes, of course, a lot of people grew up with the what you call the bastard version of Godzilla, which a lot of people seem to like for some reason. Yeah, Godzilla King of the Monsters with Raymond Bird. I mean, nothing against the guy, but this movie's terrible. It's easily one of the worst kaiju films I've ever seen. It's heavily edited because of the politics. Yes, the original film is now available on Blu-ray and whatnot. Yeah, nearly, maybe roughly more than 40 years later after its original release. So it just unfortunately people just almost stuck with this because of that. So a little too late, I guess you can say. The damage has been done in some way. So the original film always had this anti-war kind of a thing, which yes, even at the time, a lot of people took an offense to that. Is what I'm saying. So, which is why this film was made. So, when a lot of these films were imported into America, the vast majority of the original Godzilla films were heavily edited, and some of the others that came out afterwards were also heavily edited as well to some extent, to various degrees, as of course. What I'm saying is that I know I've talked about some controversial stuff on this channel before. Um, I just want to kind of, in some ways, clear the air that it's not just the recent movies, or at least some of the recent movies, that's controversial. What I'm trying to say is that a lot of these political stuff, controversy, has been existing even way before, way back in the day. I guess to be more specific here, the early 90s. And I want to focus on a certain Godzilla film, and that one being Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. This is from the Hazes series, which, like I said before, is my personal favorite era of Godzilla. I mean, of course, granted, sure, whether I like the movie or not is completely irrelevant. That doesn't really have anything to do with the topic at hand because what's going on here is that, of course, people misrepresent the film, by the way. So, and I have a little news clip here on what I show. So, here we go. Because apparently this film was anti American, which it never was, but okay, go ahead.
Godzilla. He's just opened again in Tokyo, and visual, he's a smash.
By the way, folks, just throwing this out there like super quick before we see the rest of this, is that I have no issue with wanting to talk about politics. Yes, I know. It's a very decisive thing, especially in recent years with the whole thing with Donald Trump and all that, Joe Biden, all that jazz. Yes, it's become, I mean, really decisive. What it means now is different than compared to what it means back then. True, but still, I just want to throw it out there. Anyway.
You remember a couple, 3, 4, we did a story that they were making the 18th Godzilla movie in Tokyo. Godzilla's been around for something like, what, 35 years or whatever, the most durable movie monster ever. Well, the movie is opening now, and folks, it is a, so to speak, smash hit.
For an American, what is particularly troubling about this film is the quite apparent anti-American sentiment.
What are you talking about, mate? Where is this anti-American stuff coming from exactly? I have no idea. Again, this was the same kind of attitude ever since the original Godzilla film, because a lot of people believe that this also was anti-American because it spoke against the war, which just goes into a stereotype that Americans are supposed to be these war-loving individuals. They just want to fight everybody. You don't want to live up that stereotype, do you? But I'm not saying that's true. I'm just putting that out there. Anyway.
To summarize the story briefly, time travelers from the 23rd century come back to present-day Japan in order to eventually destroy the country economically.
Teleportation. Start.
All these time travelers, most of the time travelers happen to be white. Most of them speak with an American accent.
Again, what do you mean exactly? What are you talking about? Of course, again, nothing was explained here at all. And of course, he just glanced over the synopsis of the movie. Yes, Godzilla has always been posing a threat in all the Godzilla films, pretty much in one way or another. And that's kind of his stick. He poses a threat to humanity. Again, I said humanity. It doesn't matter if you're Chinese, Caucasian, Korean. It doesn't matter. Philippine, Indian. It doesn't matter. He poses a threat to humanity. One of the misconceptions here with the Godzilla series is that a lot of people believe that Godzilla only protects Japan, which is a lie. He's protecting the land, not the nation, but the land. Godzilla himself had destroyed Japan quite a few times before. So that seems rather contradictory, don't you think? So Godzilla is supposed to be one of these animals that's he's like a lion. A lion wants to protect his land. Just think in that sense. A large animal wanting to protect the land. So I don't know how he somehow misrepresented that. Not only that, the fact that in the film, yes, it has time travel. Yes, they were Caucasian. Yes, they spoke with an American accent, whatever that means. Because okay, there's a Brooklyn accent, and then there's also a Texan accent, and then it goes varies from different place. And that's how people would talk in Canada because they speak differently. So I was like, okay. Anyway, whatever that means. But okay, another thing I'll state out is so you mean to tell me you're perfectly fine with movies where the Americans invade an Asian nation, and that's okay, but then if Godzilla himself fought some Americans, suddenly you flip your shit. To be clear, even though I feel like this doesn't need to be said, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I don't hate America, okay? I don't hate the United States by any means, of course. Is this country does this country have any problems? Of course it does. Every country has blood in its hands. All nations do, okay? Even Japan, all right? Just throwing it out there. Anyway,
Good Lord. Has our old friend chosen sides in the Japan-U.S. trade wars? If so, the Americans have got a problem.
Christ almighty, that's another thing that annoys the shit out of me. I'm trying to paint Godzilla, he's like your best friend, he's your buddy. He's going to do all this nice for you, even though despite the fact he would destroy a bunch of stuff, he would destroy your city, he would destroy towns, he would kill a bunch of people, he would murder a bunch of folk just for standing in his way. He would destroy the military just for fighting against them. He would destroy the comedy. A lot of jobs would be lost. There'd be total man mayhem because a lot of people would be homeless because of the destruction. A lot of kids would be dying. A lot of people would lost their lives. Yeah, he just murdered an innocent woman right there in the hospital, whom couldn't escape, by the way, just because he felt like it. Yeah, what a swell guy.
If ever there was an expert in the art of country bashing, it's Mr. G. It's Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, the 18th movie in the history of the series, but this one has an edge.
What in heaven's name are you talking about?
In old Godzilla films, they dealt very superficially with social and political ideas. I am quite dissatisfied with the way they portray these ideas in old...
Godzilla versus the Smog Monster had politics in it. Even the film titled The Return of Godzilla also had politics. The Japanese versions of these films, of course. So in other words, he's full of shit. So anyway.
films as well as this one. Why don't they just decide whether to make a light entertainment or a social commentary?
It's in to be entertained. Would never try to link Godzilla with serious issues like international trade.
Terror of Mechagodzilla, the Japanese version, of course, there was some serious issues. So again, you're full of shit.
There is a distinct theme in this Godzilla movie, much more so than in the earlier ones.
The lie detector determined that was a lie.
The film titled Ebora, Horror of the Deep, Japanese version, of course, dealt with the fact of terrorism. Of course, this could actually affect the entire world when you think about it, considering the fact they have highly advanced weaponry, and of course, the whole thing with the giant monster to control it, and Godzilla has to fight them off. And you're just going to dismiss like stuff like this. So they have their own army in secret, of course. That would be considered suspicious. So
I think they made good use of the topical issue of the global economic situation.
If you get the feeling there may be confusion here, you're right. The problem is the script is very complicated. Some might even call it rococo.
I see what they're doing here. They're trying to just gather up the clips and bits and pieces of the Japanese people that were going in alignment in what they're saying. I can say, see, they were on our side. Therefore, we must have a point. Which, of course, just seems highly manipulative because they're under the mentality that, see, I got you. Like, what? That doesn't prove anything. They're still in the wrong, too.
It all starts back in World War II. A group of soldiers are preparing to A group of American soldiers are preparing to annihilate some Japanese holdouts on a remote Pacific isle. Enter a dinosaur.
Again, glancing over storyline. They're just going to be hyper-focused on something super specific, but then be vague at the same time, which seems counterproductive. But anyway, in the story, the villains in this Godzilla film do realize that politically wise, Japan would have been way too powerful. Because in the film, one of the Japanese women who does team up with the Americans for a brief moment explains that the nations of the world we have some kind of deal when it comes to weapons and whatnot, that kind of thing. Again, that's glanced over here. But the villains realize that they have to find another way to attack Japan before Japan becomes far too powerful. So they have to go back in time and stop a specific chain of events from occurring so that they can get the upper hand.
Who obviously has a natural proclivity for rescuing Japan from her woes. Japanese soldiers escape and eventually become all the key leaders of the country's economic miracle. The dinosaur, for his part, will recover.
Again, glancing over some details here, because in this specific film, where the thing is that, again, the villains realize that Godzilla himself will come around and attack the invaders, being them. They knew that Godzilla sooner or later will attack them, so therefore he had to be destroyed so that he won't be in the way of their plan. Christ almighty. Did you even see the movie?
That's a bad dose of radiation in U.S. A-bomb tests in the 50s, and thus becomes Godzilla. Enter now the time travelers, the three-headed monster King Ghidorah, intent on stopping Japan from taking economic control of the world in the future. Godzilla to the rescue.
Again, they want to prevent Japan from having some kind of agreement with other nations. It was not just about the job market. They're acting as if, oh, it's just about the job market and whatnot. No, no, no. It's about more having like some kind of deal, like a peace deal, so to speak, so that the countries won't use weapons on each other. Yes, they have something to do in regards of nuclear warheads and whatnot, of course. But Godzilla is not trying to rescue Japan. Japan is not being saved by Godzilla. That's again a misconception.
Ghidorah is thwarted. Now, in a monstrous hoedown, everyone changes sides.
But never mind the fact that America had to produce a truckload of war movies, but sure, okay.
Godzilla turns on Japan, ashamed of how materialistic it has become. And Ghidorah comes back as Japan's savior. Now, if you follow all that, there remains the question of whether the movie is anti-American.
Again, there's been a truck ton of war movies made by American companies, and everybody seemed to be fine about that.
Even the American extras who were crushed and squished by Godzilla went home happy. I don't see any anti-American sentiment in the film.
Okay, they kept his little segment there awfully short, but okay, whatever.
Well, then, if it's not international politics, just what makes Godzilla tick and stomp and screech and rip?
Okay, but you're not explaining anything at all.
We're talking about motivation here.
Where Godzilla has really been big is in what we call the ancillary market, Godzilla-related toys and games and so forth.
Well, that's capitalism for you, pal. So what?
To give an example, in 1985, the Godzilla ancillary market accounted for 5 times as much money as Godzilla 1985, which was released that year.
Sorry, somebody, he's again not really explaining anything. The movie he's referring to is Godzilla and the Legends Reborn, which was released in 1985. Yes, this, of course, is a bastard version of the original Godzilla film. The original Godzilla film is The Return of Godzilla, which, of course, spoke about politics. And the American version, Godzilla 1985, The Legends Reborn, has been, of course, like the original movie, has been heavily edited, yes, of course, due to politics.
Somebody's got to keep all this going, and someone will. In a couple of months, shooting begins on movie 19, Godzilla versus the Monstrous Moth. Bruce McDonald, Asia Now, Tokyo.
Of course, there's an argument to be made here where a lot of Americans are very pro-war, and hence why there's some of these war movies. I don't see anything making a remark about that, but okay, sure.
And those were some of the stories in Asia Now. From Tokyo, I'm Jim Hartz.
And I'm Hiroko Kuniya. Please join us again next week. Until then, sayonara.
Yeah, they want to make a lot of these types of movies, of course, when it comes to fighting and whatnot. I mean, if they wanted, they could. It's their style type of movies, of course. But if something goes against this notion, they actually think there's some kind of conspiracy theory kind of thing going on here, which seems rather odd. Of course, when it comes to cultures, everybody gonna have their own view, what they view to be right or wrong, depending on where they were living and where they were born and whatnot, of course. On top of that, this would be injected into the film that you'd be producing, obviously. And this could be a good or bad thing, depending on what that is. Just throwing it out there. But yes, America has been known for cracking these types of movies out left and right, like crazy, quite clearly. Just pointing out the fact that, again, a lot of these people seem to be really just going with the idea that you have to be pro-war or you just a sissy, I guess. Well, I'm not the one to really watch war movies, but I don't hate them either, just to be clear here. If you enjoy these types of stuff, good for you, I guess. I'm just throwing it out there. All right, let me just wrap it up here. Clearly, there is a lot to be said when it comes to wanting to keep diplomacy, trying to be fair with everybody, and how World War II affected politics in one way or another. And yeah, this is like a whole thing with that. And when it comes to culture wars and diplomacy, that's definitely a thing, quite clearly. And then the whole idea of historical context is important, which it is. The whole thing, the whole discussion of how Vietnam and America, how these two events are really interconnected in one way or another. There is that. Yet another thing that gets glanced over quite often when it comes to these movies is that these movies are attempting to show the arrogance of humanity. Oh yeah, we have all the weapons and gadgets and all that to go to war and whatnot, and people can be really arrogant in their ways, and how people can just think that they're definitely the top species on Earth. Then we have monsters like Godzilla, King Ghidorah, and whatnot, and start wrecking up the place. I think Godzilla himself has to fight said monster. And when it comes to this movie, the people that's time traveling, of course, made the monster. King Ghidorah, I mean. So in other words, humanity created its own problem. They already did that with Godzilla. So the thing that created the problem, they need him to fix the other problem. So I just kind of find it kind of weird that a lot of this stuff just gets pushed to a side. Yeah, they're trying to assume that this movie is about certain things, which of course is clearly not the case at all. Quite clearly. So, of course, there's the Cold War you have to talk about. There's, of course, quite a bit you have to speak about here, folks. You can't just brush this off as like it was nothing because there's like way too much to take into consideration and just not just brush it off like it was nothing. But my point here is that simply said is that, like I said earlier, they're just technically misrepresenting a Godzilla film, which they've done before. This was not the only time they've done that. So, in other words, like I just said, Godzilla versus King Ghidorah is not anti-American. What they're saying does not match the reality of what the intention of what the director had wanted to do. These two things aren't matching. What they think and what the director intended to do. These are two separate things here. Anyway, that'll be for now, folks. So, as always, thanks for watching and take care. Until next time, see ya. Oh, yeah, later.